Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us for today's webinar, Cybersecurity, What the Nonprofit Executive Needs to Know. I'm Dave Hammarberg, partner and leader of the firm's SOC, Cybersecurity, and Forensic Examination Practices, along with Jim Shellenberger, partner, janitor, and leader with the firm's nonprofit and affordable housing practices. Just joking on the janitor, but I had to add that in.
Thanks, Dave.
No problem. That's how this webinar is going to go. It's going to be very entertaining. For those of you who don't know, McConnelly & Asbury is an accounting and business advisory services firm with offices in Camp Hill, Lancaster, and Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania. We provide a range of services to organizations across a variety of industries. As you can see on the screen, we encourage you to visit our website to learn more.
If you joined us on past webinars, welcome back. Dave and I were excited to see nearly 100 people register for this webinar today. If this is your first webinar, welcome as well. Our monthly webinars feature various business topics to help you stay updated on what's going around in the world around us. Be sure to check out our website to catch up on past presentations, as well as current information through our blog. Now, very important, if you have questions during today's presentation, please use the built-in question function in the webinar control panel to ask Dave and I those questions. We are going to be asking you for those throughout the presentation today. For those of you that are here for CPE, and I know a number of you are, please keep in mind that there will be 3 polling questions throughout today's presentation. You will need to answer those 3 questions in order to get your certificate via email a few weeks after the webinar.
Thank you, Jim. Cybersecurity, what nonprofit executives need to know. We start off with a topic that is talked about all the time, almost, maybe too much. But it's a rising issue for clients in both corporate, nonprofit. There's really no one that doesn't have this risk. I think, as you can see in the slide here, if you combined all of the increases for the last 5 years, it was higher last year. And this is according to the 2022 Verizon data breach study. So it's a thing that we have to be aware of. There's a lot of organizations that are doing a great job mitigating this risk. You have to ask yourself, as a nonprofit organization, what are you doing? You're actively thinking about ransomware. If you're not, you're obviously not doing the things you need to do to make sure that doesn't affect your organization. So again, some statistics here. Ransomware is a big thing. We'll talk about that several times. A lot of times in these slides, Jim and I will talk about slides down the road. So, we'll talk about this stuff, and the important stuff we'll probably repeat. At the second paragraph there, errors continue to be a dominant trend. And those errors could be configuration errors. A lot of people are going to the cloud these days. Do you have the expertise to get to the cloud? Are you using a third party? Do you have that in-house? How are you doing it? And how are you making sure it's correct? Are you using a third party to check it? So again, we need to make sure things are done right the first time. Once a breach happens, etc., it's going to be a whole nightmare, a whole nother can of worms, and an expense to fix it.
Okay, so as I think about, why do we care about cybersecurity in the not-for-profit practice? I talk with not-for-profit clients all the time, and I ask the question, what keeps people up at night? And more often than not, cybersecurity is on that short list. So, that's really why. Obviously, attacks are on the rise. And we're going to talk about some real-life examples here coming up. And Dave has a ton of statistics and best practices that we're going through. But as I think about why we're here today, it's because it's top of mind for almost all executives, all not-for-profit executives.
Yeah, and I would argue that for a nonprofit, it almost seems to be worse than the for-profit. We're getting so used to seeing Target, Home Depot, all the different breaches. But if I'm cutting a check to, ABC nonprofit, I'm going to think twice. That's my hard-earned money if I'm going to pay, to give it to the nonprofit. If I'm buying a shovel from Home Depot, am I going to care if they were breached? Probably not. I'm going to go buy my shovel
right.
and bring it home. But if I'm giving it to that ABC nonprofit, I want that to work how that nonprofit says it's going. You know, whether that's feeding the poor or doing whatever.
Exactly.
So, you know, it's that you know, that marketability, I think, gets really hurt when it comes to a nonprofit breach or something in that matter. So probably should be stressed.
Absolutely, I agree.
Human element breaches, again, you hear this all the time. It's always the, you know, we can put millions of dollars of tech into an organization, and we're doing a great job with increasing the tech in regards to whether it's sandboxing emails. And when I say sandboxing emails, those emails go through, and before they get to the user, any attachments or links are detonated, and anything bad is then restricted from the user. So we're doing some incredible things to help the human employee, but it's still a huge risk, and probably the biggest risk in your organization, especially with nonprofits, with volunteers. It's as important with a volunteer as an employee to have the same training. Security awareness is huge, and again, you can see here, you know, the click rates and the, you know, do not click, you know, they're just going up. And why are they going up? Because organizations are making money sending out emails. You know, if you can send out 6 million emails and get 6 clicks, you made some good money. You know, easy to do, and I think you'll continue to see that rise until you can, until the money stops trickling in. And you know, I've heard a lot of discussion on, hey, we should make laws and regulations that it's illegal for people to, you know, from a ransomware to pay. Well, then, you know, what happens? You know, eventually those people, they don't make money, it's going to stop. But on the same note, you know, what about those 8 organizations that get ransomware aren't allowed to pay it and go out of business?
Right.
Should they really pay the price in the meantime? So there's a lot of smart people trying to figure this out. But again, going back to the human element, security awareness training, we have some great volunteers. We have some great nonprofit employees. Are they all receiving the right training? You know, we used to say, hey, are you doing annual security awareness training? That's really not enough anymore. Got to do annual security awareness training, phishing. What are you training your employees? I know at McConnelly-Nasbro, we're not a nonprofit, but you know, we're always trying to do more. Now we're sending out monthly 5-minute scenarios where clients or employees have to go through. We're testing them. We're trying to figure out, you know, we know Jim's the biggest risk, but what is the risk? You know, is he going to click on an email? You know, we really want to understand that. Until you understand that risk, how do you mitigate it?
And Dave, I don't know a not-for-profit organization that's not dealing with staffing issues, trying to do more with less. And as that only increases and that problem is out there, that only raises the importance of the human element and cybersecurity prevention and awareness, right? I think of all of the organizations that I work with, over 100 not-for-profit organizations, and not one isn't dealing with staffing issues in some capacity. That just raises this even more importantly.
I agree 100%. And I think with the staffing issues, you know, something that we wouldn't necessarily deal with 5 years ago, now it's acceptable. Hey, you know, we'll let that slide. We just, you know, just because, you know, we'll go back to the fraud side of things. Just because there's a little fraud on that person's resume, you know, we'll still let them continue.
Right.
Just because we can't find anybody else. But 5 years ago, we would have saw that and we would have ran for the hills. So we're, you know, it's a different environment. And I'm not saying, well, I'll leave it at that.
So I think we're going to launch our very first polling question. So those of you that are here for CP, please pay attention here. So the first polling question: not-for-profit organizations that do not solicit contributions online do not need to worry about cybersecurity. True or false? No, I think in today's day and age with online donations, I think a lot of organizations are accepting donations online. I don't think all of them are, all organizations are, but the question is, you know, those that do not, do they not need to worry about cybersecurity? So we'll keep this poll open for about 30 seconds. So those of you who are here for CPE, please make sure you answer so we can give you that certificate at the end of the presentation that will be sent out to you. Dave, do you ever give online?
I do.
Yeah,
I do.
I think it's just a very easy way to do it, very convenient way to do it, and often we don't think about that anymore.
Yeah, I mean, you get an email response with you know, that you donated, etc. I mean, it's quick and easy. I mean, even churches, now that COVID's going around,
Yep.
you know, you're not passing the offering plate, you're donating online.
Excellent. Wow, 100% selected false. So I don't know in the history of the McConley and Asbury webinar series if we've ever had 100% pick the correct answer. That's pretty awesome. So yes, I think every organization, regardless of whether you're soliciting online, needs to worry about cybersecurity.
This is why we don't let Jim do the security awareness training. It's just easy questions. So, but congratulations to everyone.
That's great. So why do not-for-profits, why are they concerned about cybersecurity? You know, online donations is one of them. There's other reasons why, and some of those include things like event registration. How many not-for-profit organizations are collecting information from donors, from volunteers, from clients and participants in programs via event registrations? A lot of personally identifiable information is maintained by not-for-profit organizations. It might not be the finances that are attractive to a hacker, Dave, but it's the data that's in a list, right? A donor list, credit card information, etc. Public perception and trust is huge in the not-for-profit arena, right? If a breach happens, if a security incident happens, donors are going to be less likely to potentially give to that organization. So, and lastly, you're dealing with a lot of donors and volunteers, a lot of people in and out of not-for-profit organizations. Those are just a couple of reasons that I thought of before this presentation today. But what are some others? If you have some others, drop them into the chat. Dave and I love responding to questions on the fly. So if you have some, please drop those into the chat Q&A function as well.
For sure. You know, PII is a huge deal. You know, if you're not using multi-factor authentication on your email, hackers love to get into your contacts. You know, if I can get into executive directors' contacts with some major donors, you know, get in there, figure out what they are. Maybe I stay around in their email a little bit to see if I can make money elsewhere. But at the end of the day, you know, I find that, you know, Jim Shellenberger is really not good for anything but his contact list. So you know, that's not true. But anyway, you know, I go to his contact list and I go and, you know, find the major donors. You know, he works for a major nonprofit. I look at that, and now, you know, say it's a, you know, some kind of, whether it's cancer, or let's just say cancer nonprofit. You know, I can send an email now to all of his contacts, maybe spoof the email address. So now people are replying, or maybe I set up a fake website spoofed. You know, people are now donating to me. You know, so it's important that, you know, people are like, I have nothing in my email to hide, and multi-factor authentication is too much. But it can quickly cause issues. And then are those major donors going to donate again? Correct. Did we get any additional comments, Jim?
I don't see any coming in just yet, but again, I just encourage you to please do that. Please send in some. Oh, there are a couple there. So, you know, staff changes, absolutely. We talked about that earlier, staffing issues with not-for-profit organizations, the turnover. Also, as individuals within an organization are promoted, you know, additional access is given to users. User access changes. Dave's going to talk about that a little bit later, and making sure that the right access is provided to the right levels. And as organizations are flexible, changing, merging, etc., like, you need to be looking at that. So I pulled together a little research before this on some what I call chilling statistics for not-for-profit organizations. So this was a survey that was done of 250 not-for-profits around the country about 2 years ago. And as I went through this report from the Nonprofit Technology Enterprise Network, it really scared me, Dave. Like, as I'm looking at some of these, that 59% did not provide basic cybersecurity training to their staff, not-for-profit organizations. And you just hit on multi-factor authentication. 56% were not requiring multi-factor authentication. to me, it's just become normal part of my day, right? How many times I'm clicking multi-factor to get into various programs, emails, etc. But the fact that over half of not-for-profits that were surveyed do not have any is scary. 71% of the nonprofits provided access via personal devices of their staff to secure information, which is again, you know, you talk about bring your own device to work and the risks that are there. A very small handful were only monitoring their network for changes. That's often, you know, the first indicator of a cyber attack if there's some changes done to the network. And then I know, Dave, you're big on policies and procedures, right? 45% did not have any policies for cybersecurity equipment uses or data privacy. So it's a big issue within the not-for-profit sector, and these statistics absolutely prove that.
You know, we're always trying to mitigate risk. You know, we can't make the risk zero. Of course we can make the risk zero. We could shut down, you know, turn off the computers, fire all the employees, you know, tell all the volunteers to go home. That's not the reality. But these statistics here tell me that people, you know, more than half of the nonprofit organizations, these 250 nonprofit organizations, don't have cybersecurity insurance because you can't get cybersecurity insurance anymore without multi-factor authentication, policies, procedures. That's scary because that means that executive director, that nonprofit is not thinking, you know, thinking ahead. And it is scary. I think if you looked at the corporate side of this, the numbers would be not stellar, but a whole lot different. And I don't understand why we treat corporate or nonprofit organizations different than corporate organizations when it comes to cybersecurity. There's no difference. You know,
if you're going to take away one thing from today's presentation, I think it's that, Dave. Like, it should be treated the same as any for-profit business, cybersecurity.
Right. And I don't understand the mentality. You know, obviously there, you know, maybe it's a money issue, maybe it's a, you know, financial decision. But again, you know, one breach could end the nonprofit. So
yeah, I think you're going to get into some best practices here later on this afternoon, and some of those don't cost a lot of money. Others do, but I think there's ways that not-for-profits can help mitigate that risk through some efficient and non-costly measures. We'll get to those.
100%. 100%. We'll get into that. Next slide is just a slide say introduction to cybersecurity. And the next slide here is some terms. We're not going to get into a lot of these. What I'd like to bring up here is, you know, obviously we don't want to breach. Organizations could have multiple incidents. We're really concerned about the reportable instances, which are breaches. You know, how does that, you know, information was taken, you know, meaning most likely I have to get legal involved. I have to look at reputational risk and insurance if you have it. And, you know, there's a lot to it. So we want to respond to those incidents as quick as possible, and we want to prevent them as much as possible. Most organizations, well, I shouldn't say most anymore, but a lot of organizations just don't know when they have an incident. If they have an incident or a breach, they would have to wait for a third party to say, hey, I got this information that came from you. And that's really not it.
Yeah, that survey did. Only 25% of nonprofits were actually monitoring their systems and networks for changes. That's scary.
Right. I think
something could be going on and no one knows.
I think some people sleep better at night not knowing. And it's a bad situation, and it's almost neglect at this day and age.
Yep.
So here's another 2022 data breach investigation report. I like to say I'm cool, and I said creds in that thing, but that's how it came.
I was going to ask you to explain what creds is.
Yeah, I'm really not that cool. Just an old man, pretty much. Anyway, so there are 4 key paths leading to your organization. In this picture here, we've got creds, phishing, exploit vulnerability, and botnet. We're not going to talk on botnet very much, but credentials. You know, how do you keep your credentials? You know, are you using a password manager? If you're not, I don't know how you manage your passwords. I know I have probably 200 passwords. How do you keep them all different? You know, if you have, you know, like Jim, he probably has a password summer, And then some are 1, some are 2, some are 3 for all his passwords. That's horrible, right? If I get, if I breach one organization that Jim is involved in, or one website, and it's some are 1, what am I going to try on all his other websites?
2, 3, 4. Yep.
Exactly. Some are 22. I've seen some bad things. So, that's security awareness training, right? We have to tell our users, our employees, our volunteers, hey, the passwords need to be unique, and they can't be the same as your Walmart credit card, your Target credit card. And it's important. So again, security awareness training is the only way we're going to get that through. One of the big things, and we've said this is probably the 3rd time we're bringing it up, is multi-factor authentication. We've learned as a security individuals that, humans are going to make mistakes. We're all human, right? We hear that all the time. They're not going to be perfect. Occasionally, Jim's going to make a mistake. He's going to give up his password. And that's where MFA comes in, right? When Jim gives up his password and he gets on his phone, hey, do a request. And he's like, I'm at the beach. I've been at the beach for 6 months. It's not me. He's going to say decline, and that is going to, take care of that risk. Now, if you're not, I've been at clients where they're like, well, it happens so often, I just hit approve all the time. Again, security awareness training. You can put the tech in place, but it's the security awareness training around it. So credentials is a big thing. And then phishing. Phishing is really to get your credentials. Most of that phishing is email. And again, we talked about, hey, sending 6 million emails out, you get 6 responses. That's a win for today. Why not? So there's, a lot of phishing going on, and you don't have to be very tech savvy to phish organizations. So creds phishing kind of go along. Exploiting vulnerabilities. This is a big thing that can be taken care of. Are you patching your boxes? Are you patching your Windows boxes, laptop, servers, anything? Anything in your environment needs to be patched. There's a lot of good guys out there that are breaking into things just because they like to, and then telling those organizations. And then there's a lot of bad guys trying to do the same thing. But those good guys are trying to get in front of the bad guys. And if there's a security fix that comes out for Windows, it's because there's a vulnerability. They're just not sending them out, for marketing purposes. So,
Dave, if I'm a not-for-profit executive director and I got limited resources, I got limited time, which of those 3, credentials, phishing, exploiting vulnerabilities, should I worry about first? And I know all of them are important. You're going to tell me I should worry about all of them, but which one am I going to touch first? Which one should I be most paying attention to first?
If I have no money at all, I'm going to patch everything. It doesn't cost a thing. Everyone should be doing that. That's table stakes at this game. Okay. So we almost take that one off the table. Everyone should be patching. Doesn't cost them anything. Now you could get fancy things that can't patch automatically, but if you don't have any money, you can manually patch everything. That should be done. I think multi-factor authentication. If you don't have multi-factor authentication, you need to get that. Not only on your remote access, but your email. Email is huge. That's where I see the breaches. And most organizations, I shouldn't say that now, but in probably 2-3 years ago, most organizations were getting MFA after they had a business email breach.
After fact, right?
Exactly, which is too late. So I would invest in that. There are some great products out there. If you're using Office 365, they have Microsoft Authenticator. So you're not spending a ton of money. But I know in our organization, everything you touch is multi-factor authentication, internally, externally, server, admins. There's nothing you can get into without MFA. Right. It's just, and people are like, well, it's a hassle. Is it really? You're checking your texts all day long. Can't you improve on your phone? So that's what I would say. And of course, security awareness training. Now I've pretty much said everything is important. Sorry.
all good. I appreciate the roadmap you're giving us. At least start somewhere to start with, right? All of it's important, but let's start with multi-factor.
Right. So social engineering, what is it? It's pretty much making someone do something that they normally wouldn't do. If I'm getting Jim to send the Nigerian prince in Africa $1,000. That's something he wouldn't normally do. Now that is a really old scheme, which we don't see.
Yeah, we don't see that.
It's a great example of something that Jim normally wouldn't do. So, if I call Jim on the phone and say, hey, this is the managing partner, I really need to get this done. I need you to buy some gift cards, whatnot. It's something he normally won't do. And we're seeing a lot of it. If you're getting a penetration test, which again, that's something that should be done, I would say annually, but at least every other year. Part of that is social engineering. Whether that's dropping, a USB device in the parking lot, see who brings it in. Of course, you shouldn't be using USB devices at all, but that's probably a deeper dive in there. And again, you can see in here, business email compromise is huge. And a lot of people, business email compromise, the way it works is if I'm an attacker and I get into an email, I'm going to stick around there and see what's going on. What's Jim involved in? Is there anything I can make money on? If there's nothing, Jim's a boring guy, I'm going to move on to his contact list and find, a better, more interesting person. And Jim, by the way, is not, no way.
I'm definitely not a boring guy, that's for sure. But think about it in context of a not-for-profit organization. Not-for-profits are super, super active on social media, always talking about events that are going on, galas, 5K races, and you can get a lot of information about what's going on in not-for-profit just by following. I know you're going to talk about social media later, but you can get a lot of information from not a very hard search online about what's going on, and attackers can use that to, infiltrate, right?
Oh, 100%.
Yep.
I gain your confidence by telling you what you already told me.
Right. Yep.
Probably.
Yep.
What's wrong with this picture?
Besides being really small?
Exactly. Jim, talk about this a little bit.
Well, I'm trying to see it, Dave. It's really small here. So this is one of those instances where you see on social media where you might be asked to answer a bunch of questions about yourself. Tell me about all the states that you visited to, or what street you grew up on, to answer questions from almost like a personality assessment or a test, right? And it's supposed to come out with a very funny, exciting way to better talk about who you are. Well, hackers, Dave, use this to get key information that might be a password reset, might be a clue to a password itself, right? And that information is out there on the web, very easy to get.
Right. A lot of these apps, these free apps, etc., they're coming from, Russia. They're making, these free apps are great. Let's see what kind of tree this is, what kind of plant this is. But you're also giving them access to your phone, personal information. Right. So you sort of get what you pay for a lot. In this situation, they're gleaming this data, and they're going to use that. They're going to use that on a, say it's a mortgage. Can I get enough information from Jim to open a mortgage? It's about 200, so not really, but no, just joking. But anyway, you really got to be aware of this. And again, you get what you pay for. If you have, there's a lot of good free software out there, but then there are some that, you got to really look into it. So again, this just answers the question, some of this stuff, middle name, city you were born, a lot of those are security questions. If I want to reset Jim's password, and I say, hey, I forgot my password, I intercept that email. And now I know his first pet and current street name. A lot of people use that for security questions. Favorite color, favorite animal, city where you were born. I would urge people on those security questions to not be honest, right? Like if I want to find out where Jim was born, I can do that.
Very easily.
So, use LastPass. Set up, hey, I'm logging into Walmart. My security questions are, I was born in, Europe or, Los Angeles. Don't use those, it's a weak safeguard.
Yep. So I'm going to remind the audience again to drop in the chat any questions for Dave and I. Again, we like to respond to those kind of real time. So, a few to kind of get you thinking a little bit. Has your organization or you individually been impacted by cyber attacks? I have, and a couple of the partners of the firm know about this recently. On a personal side, I was planning on going to the concert for my favorite band, which is Of a Revolution. It would have been my 29th show, and unfortunately, 5 days before the show, my Ticketmaster account was hacked. And here I thought I was really good. I was using LastPass like Dave taught me to. I have about 350 passwords in there, but a lot of them were the same. And before I knew it, somebody got into my Ticketmaster account, transferred the tickets to themselves, and they resold them 3 times on the secondary market. And I lost those tickets. So it does happen to all of us, even if you do some good preventive measures. My problem, I was using the same password multiple times on different sites, and that happened to me just about 6 weeks ago. So has your organization or you ever been impacted? Certainly feel free to share that. We won't share your name if you don't want to. Has your organization's priorities evolved to reflect cybersecurity risk over the last decade? What about during COVID-19 era? With a remote workforce and people being more geographically spread out, have your organization's policies, priorities been changed and updated to reflect, today's environment? And lastly, do you believe that your organization has at-risk data? Right. I think, when you think about donor lists, employee lists, do you have credit card information on file? Do you have data or that could be a target? I think a lot of us in the not-for-profit world certainly have that, for sure.
Yeah. If data is meaningful to you, there's someone else that's going to be meaningful to. So if you said, no one wants my data, you're wrong.
Yep. And I can see a few brave people saying, yes, you have been impacted by cyber attacks. So I appreciate that, and continue to put that into the Q&A for us as well. So again, in preparation for this, I just did a quick Google search of cyber attacks not-for-profits, and a few things immediately popped up to mind. And the point of this slide isn't to get into great detail about the nuts and bolts of the actual cyber attacks that happen to these organizations, but more from an informed perspective that this stuff does happen. And oftentimes it happens with organizations that we're very familiar with or we think have great policies and procedures. It can happen to any organization. The first one on the list, Full Abundance, is a food bank in Philadelphia. And during the early days of COVID, their systems were hacked where hackers were intercepting legitimate emails and then ultimately sending fake emails that included invoices for payment. And there was over $900,000 of a construction invoice that was paid fraudulently. And so it happens. Goodwill Industries of New Mexico, this just happened last month, where they spotted a lot of sensitive confidential information posted online for ransom, including PII, personally identifiable information. Unsure how this is happening, but it's an ongoing investigation right now. And lastly, I came across an organization out west, a human service provider in Seattle, who had multiple data breaches that impacted 103,000 people. Again, a lot of valuable information in the list, names, phone numbers, health insurance information. So it's happening out there. It's real stuff.
Yeah, we had a question just come in about penetration tests are costly. And, depending how they're done, who does them, they can be pricey. But the cost of the breach could be 10 times, 20 times that. And how do you really know if your infrastructure is good from the outside? And how do you know if your employees, if you're phishing your employees, how do you know you're phishing them to a point where, if you're phishing them with a FedEx email, or you're phishing them, hey, Jim Shellenberger as partner at McConnell and Asbury, can you do this for me to an employee from a email address?
Yep.
Are you doing enough? And I think from a standpoint, if I was on the board or a donor, I would like to see that it's secure. And how do you know? You just don't know if you don't have a penetration test. I think you're going to see a lot of cyber insurance that isn't renewed because of a couple things. You know, we talked about MFA, we talked about penetration testing, and EDR. We're going to get into that, endpoint detection response. But you know, there's going to be some things that force us on it. But you know, it's tough because it's not just nonprofit. You know, you're always trying to convince a board, whether that's for-profit, nonprofit, to do the right thing. And that board is looking at a lot of times the bottom line. You know, or from a nonprofit standpoint, how can I do more with my money? You know, for the community, etc. And you know, we have a responsibility to be, you know, diligent, good stewards with donors' money. And I think that is a good way of making sure that that happens.
Yeah, board of directors, Dave, have a fiduciary responsibility to the public to make sure that adequate safeguards are there for those funds and for those dollars. So I think it's more than just a nice to have. It's a true needed expense to fulfill the mission of the organization, in my opinion.
If you have a board without someone that is knowledgeable on the cybersecurity front,
yep.
Your board has a weakness.
You used to always say you needed one accountant, one banker, and one attorney on a nonprofit board of directors. But now you're right. You need somebody with cybersecurity expertise as well.
Right. So think about that in your boards. Who is that person? Do they know that is that person is that responsibility? And have them step up to the plate because they need to be pushing this stuff.
So we're going to move into some cybersecurity best practices, and Dave has a lot of examples here. So I just want, again, to think about your own organizations, share those with us, and we can answer. But we're going to launch polling question number 2. So for those of you that are interested in CPE, this is where you tune back in and make sure you pay attention. So which position should be concerned with cybersecurity at a not-for-profit organization? Is it the chief technology officer and the IT department? You know, IT department worries about cybersecurity. Is it the executive director? Or is it the chief financial officer? Or is it all of the above? Or is it all of the above and others? I know I like to just have Dave worry about cybersecurity for me. Him and his team in the IT department do a fantastic job. I don't need to worry about it.
That's why we keep Jim off the internet and the network. With crayons.
It's true. Dave likes to use, you like to use me as your example in all of our internal trainings here at McConnell and Asbury for cybersecurity risk.
Yes, you should see us in person. That is a very, it's almost a comedy. We should charge.
Yeah, we should. So again, if you're here for the CPE, please make sure you respond to the question. There's no right or wrong answer. But we do need to have that response in order to verify your attendance. I'm going to give you 10 more seconds before I close the poll. So get those last answers in for me, please. I'm anxious to see these results if we have 100% correct again. Pretty close. So we had nobody answer 1, 2, or 3, which is correct. All of the above are concerned and should be concerned with cybersecurity, but there's others besides just IT. The president and fiscal, right? The board of directors. I think volunteers should be worried. All the employees of an organization need to be worried about cybersecurity. So all of the above and others is the correct answer there. All right, Dave, give us some good best practices. Go through a couple different topics for us here, and I think this is where we can get into some real actionable items here.
All right. You know, before we jump into this, just want to say one thing is, you know, our nonprofit organizations, for-profit organizations, I should stop saying for-profit because this is just nonprofit, but nonprofit organizations really need to look at themselves, do a risk assessment of what their risks are, because it's very hard for organizations to know what to mitigate if you don't know the risks and where your gaps are. I've seen a lot of organizations with a lot of controls in one area. So they do well in one area and they spend a lot of money in one area. But if they would have, you know, taken some of those controls and, you know, taken that money and put it in other areas, they could be a lot more, you know, that risk could be a lot less to the whole organization. So again, if you're not doing a risk assessment, do one. A lot of times I like to take a framework, work off of that. and turn that into a risk assessment. Do that at least annually, so you can figure out where you are. It's a good presentation for the board as well. So threats and scams are everywhere. We mentioned this, why does it work? Or why are we still getting phishing in 2022? Because people are clicking on things and it's profitable.
Dave, I have a question regarding spam and spam messages. What's your take, and I'm putting you on the spot here, sometimes in your email system you see that button that says unsubscribe. What's your thought on actually using that feature or some type of third-party feature to unsubscribe you from lists?
I don't like responding to anything I don't know about. So, there's legitimate organizations out there with that information, but I rather just right-click on the email and say, block this sender, right? So that sender then goes to spam all the time. That's the easiest way. Why, if someone's seeing if you're alive on the other end, why give into them?
Right.
Right-click, say, send, block this domain. You can block the whole domain. Don't ever do that with the McConnelly and Asbury blog. But
yeah, please keep that one open.
Yeah. So, but that's the easiest way to do it, in my opinion. I never want to let the other person know that there's someone on this end. So, and again, you are the last line of defense. All of your IT initiatives, whether that's intrusion prevention, intrusion detection, your EDR, some things are going to get through. They're always going to get through because the attacker has a huge environment to figure out how to get through. They just have to find one little pinhole, and the IT guy's got to close everything. So there's always going to be a risk with employees. So think about that. I tell my the employees here, hey, if an email is sent and you don't know it's right, attackers love to use Friday evening, 5 p.m. Hey, do this real quick before you leave. It can wait. It can wait 24 hours. It can wait to Monday. If you weigh the consequences, a breach versus 24 hours or 48 hours, you don't want that to be you. You don't want to be that person. So, moving on. Keep this rolling. Think something is suspicious, alert IT. In the past, I've seen a lot of clients, someone will click on something and, they don't tell anybody. They just close their computer, reboot. 3 weeks later, everyone on their contact list gets crazy emails. And they're like, oh, well, 3 weeks ago, I didn't think anything happened. If they would have told us right away, we could have closed it, we could have addressed it in seconds, and it wouldn't have been an issue. But now they've been in your email for 3 weeks. What have they done? And so it's a big issue. And employees have to know that they can trust the IT department, they can trust security. But the quicker we know, the better. So again, alert IT.
Dave, internally here at McConnelly, we have a fish alarm button, right, to really help facilitate that. And it's just very easy to click on a message or see a message, and if you're not sure about it, you click this alarm button and it immediately sends it to our IT team to address. I think it's a very simple tool that can be implemented within probably different types of environments, right? I'm not an IT guy, but it seems like a pretty easy thing to do.
I mean, probably organizations have this already, but we're also putting it on our smartphones. So then you can, because there's a lot of emails that you can't see very well on your smartphone, right? So we do a lot of phishing, and Jim might say, hey, I didn't realize it was phish because it was on my. I'm like, well, then wait till you get to your computer. Again, there's no reason to be in a rush.
Right.
If you're in a rush, bad things happen. So and that's why people send crazy emails when people are on vacation, late at night. They want to introduce that fear of being late. So we'll skip over some of these because we've talked about them to move on.
You'd be surprised how many times I see a password written down on a desk or on a post-it, Dave, when we're doing audits or reviews and having a conversation, and I happen to glance over and I see a password written down. Just don't do it, guys. Just don't do it.
right? I mean, that's sort of old school now. Hopefully they have MFA.
Mhm.
But you know, if they're writing down passwords on desks, still probably don't have MFA. So that is a scary situation. Callback number. You know, voicemail now usually goes to your email. So you know, if you get a crazy email and you do the right thing and you pick up the phone and you call John Doe and say, hey, did you leave me an email? You know, if you're not talking to John Doe and you leave him a voicemail, and then you get an email back that says, hey, it was good. Well, you got to realize that the attacker sees the voicemail, the email, the attacker's responding to you. You know, they're already in his email box. They've already set up rules so that when you respond, you know, it goes to that individual. So again, you want to talk to that individual. So that's important. I've seen breaches there, way too many. And again, probably should say here, donors will appreciate the effort when they know you're protecting their information. It's a true statement. And, you know, I think those donors mean well. And we have, again, a responsibility to take care of their information.
But I also think of clients too, Dave, in the nonprofit community, right? So if you're serving a certain population and you have, you know, clients that you're collecting, you know, secure and confidential information, they're going to appreciate you keeping their information secure. They're going to want to be coming into your office, coming into your organization to receive the services that they need when they know that their information is going to be protected. They're often in a vulnerable state to begin with. Why add one more thing on top of that that they're going to be worried about?
Right, right. Email attacks, we probably beat this to death already today. It's hard not to advertise your email address publicly. It happens. We want to do the, you know, we obviously don't want to sign up for things, you know, big outdoors person. I don't want to be signing up, you know, for a Cabela's newsletter with my MacPass account.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you want to keep that strictly for business. Obviously, LinkedIn is a big thing. You can get a ton of information on there. Really can't do anything about that. It's sort of, you know, needed for business, needed for, you know, from a marketing standpoint, et cetera. But we got to be careful with that. Again, email is suspicious. Nowadays, you know, if someone gets control of someone else's email, just because I look and it says Jay Shellenberger at macpass.com, do I know that's real? Like if the tone is off, you really have to sit back and say, is that Jim? You know, he usually doesn't talk that way. His signature's off. He addressed me by my full name. He usually calls me James and not Jim, or, you know, something. But you need to instill that in all your employees.
Dave, one of the things I've seen some not-for-profit organizations do, because they want to be open to the public, they want to be receptive to the community, rather than publish Dave Hammarberg at xyznotforprofit.org as their email address, they might use something like president at XYZ organization, and that gets filtered into a separate inbox, a separate location. So you're not essentially commingling what could be a private email or sensitive email with what might be coming in from the public.
Yeah, you see a lot of, you know, on websites for contact us that they no longer have emails. They just have, you know, a form to fill out, and then that gets forwarded to whoever. So great ideas.
Yeah, Dave, we're getting a question about that. You know, what do you think about having email addresses listed on websites? I mean, I see it out there for sure. I also see when it's spelled out. So it might say, instead of the actual email address, it might be spelled out at, you know, instead of the at sign, XYZ not for profit.
I mean, best practice is not to have it, obviously. And best practice would be not to use, use something more obscure than Jay Shellenberger. But a lot of organizations have been using that for years, and they have other mitigating factors surrounding that. But best practices would be to not have that contact information, more have, hey, if you want to contact Jim Shellenberger, fill out this form. Again, if you have that information on there, bots and everything else is going to be gleaming that information, and you're just going to get more phishing emails. More attacks, et cetera. And again, are you mitigating that with the sandboxing, the spam filters? You might be like, hey, this is how we do business, and we realize the risk. Again, that goes back to the risk assessment. that's how we're going to do it. So you really have to make a decision of how you're going to do it. So, I mean, we do all these webinars and seminars and conferences all the time, and at the end we have our email addresses.
Yeah,
so,
that's a good point.
You know, we have a ton of mitigating factors with the, you know, everything we have. You know, we have EDR, which, you know, we're running down on time, and I really wanted to get to a couple of things like that. You know, are you using an EDR? You know, what is an EDR? Endpoint detection response. You know, the old days of using just antivirus is just not good enough anymore. Are you using something that's going to help detect ransomware, shut it down before it gets into your network? You know, a great example of that would be like SentinelOne. I think in the next year or two, you're going to see cyber insurance companies requiring that. You want cyber insurance? You're going to have to do this. So, you know, we saw that with MFA this year. I had a ton of clients that said, hey, you know, we pushed this off and pushed this off, now we can't get cyber insurance. So the cyber insurance companies are requiring a ton more, and they're paying out, you know, less for less things. So maybe they're getting smarter, I don't know, or something. But just going through these. Again, don't click on emails you don't know about. You know, a lot of times I'll get an email and I'll be like, hey, I want to click on that, but I know I can go to a website or search for that in Google and find it on the web instead of clicking on that email.
Right.
That's a useful technique. Unencrypted drives, everything should be encrypted these days. If you lose your laptop, it shouldn't be a big thing. Of course, it's a big thing if you don't have backups, and that's another big thing. You know, have backups. But everything should be encrypted. You know, your information that goes over wireless connections got to be encrypted. Is it going over a VPN? Again, best practices. Don't leave your devices unlocked. I tell our staff all the time, lock your devices. When you go up from the computer, you know, the Windows key and lock. L. You know, you lock it. It's not a big deal. It takes 3 seconds to log in, even with MFA.
And think about it in the not-for-profit space, Dave. How many volunteers are coming through some organizations? You know, it takes not long to be able to get information off a machine that is left unlocked and left open. So, in that industry, that area, you're gonna have a lot of people, a lot of eyes potentially see some very sensitive information.
Right. Web filtering, we talked about this. We need to do some web filtering. Well, actually, we talked about email spam filtering. Web filtering, you know, we want to keep our employees honest, but we also want to make sure that we block those sites that, you know, did we accidentally misspell it and we go somewhere and, you know, now, you know, someone has access to our environment. So web filtering, again, we've talked about web filtering for 10 years. You need to have web filtering. Transmitting data, we want to make sure it's over a VPN. If you're in a coffee shop, you know, use your hotspot and use your VPN. You know, there could be a ton of people there just collecting that traffic.
And I think there's a lot of VPN options out there, Dave, for, you know, particularly organizations that might not have a lot of resources. It's not expensive now to get a VPN and have that for your system. Yeah,
I think there's varying degrees of security with that. But again, do your research and make sure that, you know, obviously, like I said, hotspot and VPN is your best option. Even if wireless is available,
yep.
Hotspot and wireless, or hotspot and VPN. And usually most people have hotspot on their VPN or on their phone nowadays. Document information handling. Again, if the information is useful to you, it's useful to the attacker. Simple old school stuff, you know, for the 5 of us and me who print still, you know, don't leave it on the printer. You know, if that contains, you know, we don't want the janitor to see it. We don't want, you know, a client walking by to see it. Just best practice. Leave your desk clean. We don't want tax returns all over the place. Donor information, checks, bank account information. All that information could be gleaned and sold on the dark web, you know.
Yeah, Dave, I think of nonprofits who might be receiving a lot of checks, you know, in person at a front desk, you know, or have very confidential information that their clientele are dropping off and providing. a simple $250 lockbox that you can put in the lobby can secure that information so it can't be taken and then used to start a cyber attack and whatnot.
Right. Exactly. Never use untrusted source. Again, make sure your computer is secure. If you're using the same computer your kids are playing games on, it's not secure. Use a work computer for work, and don't let other people use it for other things. Make sure that your password's unique. All the volunteers can't share a password. Bad situation, and maybe you're doing that to save licenses. It's not worth it. And again, this goes back to old school. If you don't want someone to see it, don't put it on a computer. Don't email it. Don't put it through Teams. Don't text it. Someone's going to see it. So think about it. If you don't want Jim to see it, you don't want me to see it, don't send it through email. Not that Jim and I are the attackers, but you get what I'm saying. Update your machine all the time. And again, everyone should have EDR on their computer. Endpoint detection response. Again, if ransomware comes in, it makes it to that desktop. That is sort of the last defense. Again, we talked about this already. Make sure that you use your work machine for work over a VPN. And this is sort of old school too. Don't jailbreak or root your devices. Use them how they are. Take off default passwords, etc. And I think we're going to launch a poll now.
I think we just need to advance a couple more slides. We want to get that last polling question in for you guys to make sure we get you your CP credit. Dave is a wealth of knowledge when it comes to cybersecurity best practices. These slides are all available for your download, so you can make sure you get them and get that information. But our last polling question for those of you getting CPE, does your organization currently use an EDR application? Simple yes or no. More of a polling, we just need to get your response here for CPE purposes for those that are interested.
This is it really makes you sleep better at night from a security standpoint, knowing that, if Jim does click on something or another employee does click on something, that there's another line of defense. Everyone's going to make a mistake. So you got training, you've got this EDR. Is it expensive? It's expensive, but again, a breach is going to be several times.
10 times more, right? At least.
Right. So, and there's a lot of applications out there that are discounted for nonprofits, et cetera. Don't be afraid to ask. So
again, get your polling questions in for those that need CPE. We're going to be closing the poll here in just a few seconds, and it is now closed. So Dave, that's encouraging.
Yeah, that is awesome. That is a lot more than I anticipated. So that is great news. And like Jim said, the rest of these slides probably useful for you. We just real quick, we kind of cut these slides in half. We still didn't make it through, but I'm sure we'll be talking again. We can cover the rest of them. But just for everyone's knowledge, or they can walk through them, and if you have any questions, can contact us.
Absolutely. So if we can go to that last slide, I just want to again thank everybody, particularly those who provided some questions to us. That certainly was appreciated. We do like having that. But thank you to all of our participants here today for joining us on today's webinar. As Dave said, if you have further questions regarding today's presentation or your specific circumstances, reach out to us. Our information, our email addresses are out there, whether that's risky or not, they are out there. A recording of today's presentation will be posted to our website and our social media sites as well, so keep a lookout for those. And for those of you who answered the polling questions and are asked for CPE, those certificates will be sent out within the next few weeks. We try to get those out within 2 weeks. So again, thank you for that as well. And Dave, I appreciate all of the knowledge and information you shared with us today. And again, thank you to everybody for joining us. And I hope you have a great rest of your Thursday.